right? And so because of that, we have to make sure that even in analyzing all these, gender discriminations and what have you, we go into the root of the problems. Now, talking about the Leah issue, for instance, yes, it's an insecurity-related problem. But then, we cannot also look away from the religious hatred that is attached to this. Because see, for every Boko Haram related violence, kidnapping or bomb blast or what have you, there is a religious intonation attached to it. And until we start having this conversation, it is like a surgical operation. There is no surgical operation that leaves the person, the patient, the way they came. There has to be a scar. And I feel that we don't want to have this conversation because we feel religious-related issues that has become politicized in Nigeria, it's very sensitive. So we don't have to have them. But we don't want to have them, but we need to start having them. Because considering Leah's issue, since she was adopted, allegedly, out of 110 girls that were adopted and kidnapped alongside her, it was alleged that she was the only one that was not released. Why? Because she did not renounce her faith. So you see what I meant by the religious intonation to it. So until we have that difficult surgical conversation that insurgency in Nigeria, Boko Haram terrorism in Nigeria is politically and religiously inclined, we need to face these things. And facing it will then help us start addressing the connecting problem attached to violence, which is sexual related problems. I mean, sexual and gender-based violence happens every now and then. Yeah. But you see, when there is violence, it's almost like a default thing for sexual violence to be attached to it. Now, let me give a scenario. This is where I'm going to end. When I'm presently in Lagos, I traveled home. I'm based in Abuja. I traveled home late last year, and I traveled by road because flights. We all know how flights can be and all. And I traveled late in the night. We got to Kogi very fast. We got to Kogi Kaba area, and our vehicle stopped. It just stopped working. We didn't even know what was going on. The driver tried, handled it well in the middle the night, like around 3 a.m. or thereabouts. It wasn't until like an hour later we did not see any vehicle, no soldiers, nothing at all on the road before he told us what the problem was. Passengers were telling him, "Oh, stop, let's do it," and all. Until we got to a place, he told us that place where the vehicle stopped. If I had stopped, I cannot guarantee anybody's safety. Wow. In that vehicle, we had about, I think, 60% of women. Or thereabouts. But the only thing I was thinking of? I was thinking, if anything happens, I am a woman, what would happen to me? That was the default thing I was thinking about. I wasn't thinking about my laptop, my ATM, or anything. I was only thinking, I wasn't even really thinking about my family at that instance. I was just thinking, I'm a woman, what will happen to me? And so, where violence is being discussed, there is no way we cannot go away from sexual and gender-based instances attached to it. And that is what is happening now. Now it's also been alleged that since her adoption, or since her kidnap rather, she's been married to one of their commanders. She has 2 children, divorced that person and married to another person. So at what point do we really want to face the fact that Nigeria is like a volcanic, is like a house that is close to a cliff and can fall at any point in time? So I only hope that with this 7th year commemoration, we will be able to, really, really call the federal government, the NGO space, which is where I work, apart from being a lawyer. We can only do a lot we can do, right? But it still boils down to our federal government, state government, local government. Why? Because it is politically inclined. I think I'd like to stop here for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ifenla, for taking us through, all of what you've said, because at the end of the day, we need to look at it holistically. And if we're looking at it holistically, then we can't actually say we want to close our eyes or shy away from political and religious inclination to some of these very important issues, especially when it comes to the safety of girls, when it comes to protection of, the rights of women and girls. So thank you very much for taking us through that. So, Baristolu, let me come back to you. Now, holding the government accountable, how do we get to do this, to ensure the safety of women and girls in conflict zones? Because at the end of the day, we are the most hit and we are the worst hit when it comes to conflicts, when it comes to a lot of, fights or any of these things that could happen in different parts of the nation. So, how do we get to hold the government accountable, to ensure that to a very large extent we are safe?
Thank you for the question. Having enlightened on the role of the government in protecting women and girls, especially those living in conflict-affected communities.
Yeah.
We've seen that there is an obligation on the part of government to fulfill. Then now, when there is a lacuna on the part of the government, what do we do? So first, there is a legal action that we can take.
Okay.
So we can constitute a form of group legal action to take the government to court, asking and demanding that the government fulfill its obligation to protect the citizen, to protect women and girls in Boko Haram captivity, like Leah, like thousands that we might not even get to see their names on the face of social media or whatsoever that are in captivity. So this is one action to take. Another one will be this grassroots advocacy. The way we are doing, we're speaking about it, bringing the issue to forelight, making use of the social media, talking about it, carrying placard to let people know that this is what is happening. This girl Leah is still in captivity. She's there with them. Her fundamental human right has been violated. Right to dignity and all has been violated. So we can keep on making this conversation. And our country belongs to so many international communities. We've signed the CEDAW, which is the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. We are part of the ICC. We are part of all these international treaties that protect women and girls, but we are not doing that. Then shall we begin to ask the international community to also step in so that they can come into a sort of force, especially with the ICC, which is the International Criminal Court that has the jurisdiction to mandate Nigeria to investigate the atrocities and to also make sure that the perpetrators are brought to book. I'm aware that the ICC has started something, but at the end of the day, they said they were not sure the Nigerian government is really willing to prosecute, to give the necessary support for them to come and try, all these perpetrators. So we can make use of international support. We can make use of the courtroom. We can make use of social media influencers, the journalists, the people who are out there. We can also go through all these local places, speaking in languages that they can understand, which is our lingua franca, so that everybody knows that this is what is happening. Because we are quick to forget issues. Sometimes when you even talk about... Hello, am I still in?
Yes, you are. We can hear you.
Okay. Sometimes when...
All right.
we thought the Nigerian government has rescued her. No, she has not been rescued. She's still there. So we must keep on with this conversation so that the government recognize that there is an obligation that they are meant to discharge, which they are not discharging. So we can continue to make demands for stronger laws, just like Ivela mentioned the VAP Act. A lot of states has not domesticated the VAP Act, which is the most comprehensive form of a law that speaks against violence against women in every situation. So we need to start making all those demands through grassroots activism, mobilization, legal action, seeking for international support. And I believe by so doing, the Nigerian government will know that, these people are ready. I really want them to protect girls like Leah, Sharibu, who are in Boko Haram captivity.
Okay. Thank you very much, Barsa, for taking us through some of the different ways in which we can actually hold the government accountable and, seek their attention in terms of safety of women and girls in conflict zones and, just basically everywhere. Because if we're looking at conflict zones, our minds might just go straight to, the northern region, because that's where we have lots of conflicts coming from. But hey, even in your next, community, the community close to you, once they're coming to kidnap, somebody, or something is happening, trust me, you won't be able to sleep. So that means at the end of the day, we're all facing one form of it or the other in our communities. So thank you, Barrister Taiwo, for taking us through that. Okay, so now, Hassan, let me come to you. Barrister Taiwo has talked about how we can hold the government accountable. She has mentioned what we can all do, what, taking it from grassroots mobilization, it's international community and all of that. Now, I would want to bring it down, to civil society, just to bring it the conversation closer. What role do you think that civil societies and activism play in pressuring the government for action? Do the government still listen to activists? Do we still have, does the government still want to hear what the people are saying through people who have given themselves to make sure that some of these issues don't just go under the carpet? Do we still have the government attention? Can we still call for action through, activism and even, civil societies and all of that?
Yes, definitely. That option is always there. Although I must say that no government ever wants to listen to the people. So that the question is always about how much force you can bring to bear and what pain points of the government do you target. That is what makes government to respond. I mean, we remember the campaign around the Chibok girls, how the global embarrassment that it generated compelled the government to respond, and it even had a political consequence for the regime at that time. I think that's the kind of campaign we need to be looking at regarding Leah Sharibu, because Leah Sharibu has become a blot on our collective conscience as a nation. She is a constant reminder, because Yoruba people will say, that is, if somebody is dead, you could even forget them. But when someone is stolen away, abducted, they are a constant reminder of our failure as a society. They are a constant reminder that whatever government is in place at any point in time, they continue to breach, their social contract, towards it. And that's why at civil society level, also at the level of the trade unions and co, we need to look at what we can do. I think we need to have a campaign that can involve protest demonstrations, but also lobbying of members of the National Assembly, to even get some responses from them regarding what they can do, to get security operatives, the army and co, to focus all of the military operations, towards trying to find and rescue this person, because we have not been hearing anything about any ongoing action to rescue Leah Sharibu. We have been hearing that the military is making progress here and there.
Yeah.
But there is no indication that there is an ongoing military effort to locate Leah Sharibu and to try and rescue her. This must not be allowed to continue. So that one of the things that can be an immediate fallout of the conversation we're having here could be to say that all of the groups here, we want to come together and do, a public petition, that we can then take to other organizations to sign, and then table that before the relevant committees of the National Assembly. I mean, we'll be surprised at the kind of response that can bring out. But most importantly, will also be to have a consistent campaign going forward. It's unfortunate that the 7th anniversary of abduction is happening, without a bigger event really marking that. I'm sure that outside of this program we're having now, for the Nigerian society, people are not even aware, that she has spent up to that number of time. So, but it's better late than never. So, and I think that at our own level, at the level of the youth right campaign and society organizations that I have links with, we can look at what we can do to ensure that, because it's not just about waiting for the next anniversary. We want Leah Sharibu to be housed immediately. So it's about using this program as a reminder for all of ourselves that we are also feeling our duty and that we need to step up now immediately and begin to do something.
Okay. All right. I like the aspect of having a consistent campaign that won't go down. So that we keep reminding ourselves. And yes, you're quite right when you say that we don't have a bigger maybe program or a bigger call that would draw the government attention or get to the real stakeholders when it comes to Leah Sharibu, because now as it is, not so many people know that Leah has spent 7 years. We here at Women Radio try, by all means to see that at every news bulletin we have the countdown of Leah Sharibu and of course Chibok girls. But outside this little efforts that we make, are we still concerned? Do we still carry this in our hearts? Because when we do, then we get to put in efforts towards seeing that we bring back Leah. All right. Thank you very much, Hassan, for taking us through that. Now, let me come back to you right now. Let's see. Let me go to Ifenla. Now let's look at the long-term psychological and social consequences that these abductions get to have on survivors and their families. I mean, we put out a video for the commemoration of Leah Sharibu, and the parents, were still crying over this. The parents were still they were still saddened. You could actually feel the emotions, even from the few seconds clip that we had of the parents. So we can just imagine how they can, this could keep ringing in their minds. So it's one thing for you to know that, oh well, my child is gone, I can't get to see this child because he or she has died. That then it's another thing for you to know that your child is somewhere. You don't even know how the child is faring, and you are just living just based on what you get to hear. There's no concrete information about that child because you can't even reach out. You can't even get in touch with this child. You're just, so that could actually be a lot, for her family and the survivors themselves. Even for the girls that were released, adopted girls that were released, how we show that they're over, that incident. So, Ifena, please let us know the long-term psychological and social consequences of these abductions on survivors and their families, and even, on our society as a whole. Because we've had some people who, since that time, have said, "Oh, my girl child will not go to school again. No, forget about it. They won't go." So, I mean, that could actually be a consequence too. So, take us through the psychological and social consequences of these abductions.
Yeah, thank you for that question. This question is a little bit personal for me because I used to be a victim of sexual based violence, but I like to say that I got lucky. Nothing happened. I was able to fight my way through. I mean, this was when I was in secondary school or thereabout, and it happened with a teacher in my mom's compound where my mom's shop was. But I didn't tell my mom about this at all until maybe 7 years ago. In fact, she even saw it on social media when I put it up on social media. That was the first time she heard about it.
Wow.
And my mom's reaction, so I'm sharing my story so that it would come close to home. My mom's first reaction was to tell me to pull down the post. And I told her, no, I am not going to pull down the post.
Oh.
She tried to make a case of it's been a long time and what would people say, the people, and where my mom's shop was at that time is still where our shop is. Even though the man is no longer there, he since moved with his family and his teacher, colleagues, and what have you. And I said, Mommy, this is my story. This is my experience. And she was like, but why didn't you tell me? I said, this is the same reason why I didn't tell you. Because you would probably want to shut me up. And in those days, when I was in secondary school, I was being the firstborn, an average firstborn in a Yoruba home, cool, calm, collected. You have to be well disciplined. You have siblings, So there was no telling my mother. Now, how much more someone, and I didn't even know the psychological effect to me until my adult life, when some of my male friends would tell me, Ifela, have you noticed that anytime we try to argue, like you don't, these are friends in my circle, friends who are friend guys who are like brothers, that I go over to their place, I sleep over in their house, there's no intimacy that they are like my brothers. But I didn't even know that that gap was there. And I was arguing. I said, "No, what do you mean I don't?" Or he said, "No, like there is, and it's not just about him." So he asked me to ask other guys in our circle. And I reached out to them and they said, yes, that there's just always that maybe 1 second, that it's not the way I hug ladies in a circle. And I was like, wow. And I had to do a soul searching because I mean, I thought it didn't happen to me. I'm okay, it's not too deep. But truth of the matter is, it went deep into that time. And so, when we're talking about the psychological and social effect of violence, or in this case, or by default, sexual gender-based violence, it's not something that ends. That's the truth. It probably never ends because as I'm even talking now, I can even remember the incident itself, right? And so if we want to address the root problem, or how to help victims of abduction, rape, or what have you, we have to know that it is a psychological thing, and as much as we want them to heal, they also have their own place and space of healing, because people like that go through several stages. It's like the 5 stages of grief, so to speak. But this time, they go through the stage of fighting. I fought my way through. In fact, my sister was with me that day. As soon as I realized what was about to happen, I made sure my sister left first. My sister is like 7 years younger than me. So I made sure she left that room. I fought my way. I boxed, blood, hit the man. I fought my way through. So there is the fight aspect of it. There is the flight aspect of it. Victims get frightened. And when you're frightened, you freeze up. You cannot even act. You can't do anything. And there is also the flight aspect. You want to run away. So people go through all the stages, and the long-term thing is that it's either it makes them frozen or it makes them go wild. Go wild in that someone who used to be cool, calm, collected, gets abducted or kidnapped and then goes wild, starts doing drugs just to get away from depression or what have you. Or they go into their shell, someone who used to be, a life of the party, an average sanguine, but then because of that problem, they don't want to come into the society again. So it's more psychological than it is even physical, because it is a thing. People keep on rehashing that thing over and over and over again. And the roles of psychologists, of mental health practitioners, of counselors, of NLP, neuro-linguistic practitioners, it can't be overemphasized, because this is basically what they do. Unfortunately for me, I didn't even need to, as at that time when my friend spoke to me, I was already taking courses on NLP. And so that was what helped me understand what was going on. But imagine if it didn't happen. That was 7 years ago. Imagine if my friend didn't even notice it. I wouldn't have known. And so we see women who have been victims of kidnap, or even men also. So it's not just a woman thing. It even happens to men. As much as I'm a feminist, I'm keen on women empowerment and what have you, but I'm always concerned about the male child, because I feel that the kind of stigma attached to violence-related issues that women face, it is almost a double jeopardy for men, because the way society has groomed men and the boy child, you are a man, you should be a man, you should be able to defend yourself. God forbid that a man is going through domestic violence. God forbid. Like you're a man, your wife is beating you.
Honestly.
So you can say as society, if I allow for a woman to go through domestic violence and just pity her, hey, sorry, run for your life. But when it is a man, people laugh at the man. Like your wife, they beat you.
How?
Are you a man at all? This thing is a societal thing. Even if the family members understand, they want to help that victim get out of the problem. What about the society? How would the society take up such a person? Average women who go through these problems, they face difficulties in their marriages. Some of them, like, it's not even because of the psychological problem, they can't even find themselves holding jobs because they're always thinking any little reaction or any little incident takes them back to that problem. So I feel that to tackle it, it's something that everybody has to be involved. Everybody has to be involved. And you don't even have to be an inclusion advocate, a person gender-based expert, a lawyer, or what have you, to, hold this notion. It's something for everybody. Everybody deserves dignity of respect to their persons. Everybody deserves that. So until we come to that table where we see that, okay, women face domestic violence, women go through problems after kidnap, men also go through this. How do we handle this? How do we help people? It can happen to me. It can happen to you. So when we internalize this and see the fact that it can also happen to us, then it stops making it look like it's a damn issue. It's their problem.
It's their problem.
My problem. I can't relate. It can happen to anybody.
Sure.
And so when it comes close to home, what are you going to do? We need to open up, allow these people to heal. We should stop saying that, oh, it's happened a long time ago, we should move on. No! They don't just move on like that.
Okay.
Because people get triggered. Little things trigger them.
Yes, of course.
And some people have ended up, getting into even criminal, issues just because they could not, find help. Or maybe their family members threw them out. And, this social media thing of what was she wearing? And what did he also do? Maybe, looking at the Unique Girls, drama that happened, that went viral. So violence is violence, no matter the gender attached to it, whether it's a man or a woman. Every human being deserves the dignity and respect to their persons and should not go through any kind of violence. And we, as a society, we should know that it can happen to anybody, whether you're rich, whether you're poor. Bad things happen to people. It's not about how sane or saints or safe or bad you are. Things happen, and we must be ready to make sure that we help people who go through such problems.
Of course. Thank you so much, Ifenla. We must be ready to help people. Whether they're people we know or people we just heard their stories or people that we have, maybe had an encounter with, let's be ready to help. Because at the end of the day, they've gone through things that you can only imagine, but they have actually gone through it. Okay, so let's be kind and let's give them room to actually heal, and let's not fast forward the illness for them just because we think, oh, now this small thing, allow and pass. After all, it happened years ago, so why are you still holding on to it? Let's give people room to heal at their own pace. All right, as a society, we can support survivors, we can support families of those who their children or their relatives or somebody they know that has been kidnapped or has gone through similar situations. So yeah, thank you very much, Ifenla. Now Hassan, let me come back to you. Talking about the Nigerian youth right now, beyond advocacy, what other practical steps do you think that a Nigerian youth can take to demand justice for Leah and others in similar situations? Because even as we're looking at it like Leah Matana 7 years ago now, you don't see the government waiting, they don't do that time, and now they won't do them. So even as much as we're having some of these comments coming in or coming to people's minds, or we get to hear it whether passively or actively in the society, we still have similar situations happening. Maybe not as much as the girls were picked in Dabchi and even in Chibok. Maybe not as much, but we still have such things happening. So, what do you think the Nigerian youth can do? What steps can we take as Nigerian youth to demand justice for Leah and others in such situations?
Well, to be honest, I really don't see an alternative to advocacy when it comes to this, to be honest. Because at the end of the day, it's not a question of the fact that it's impossible to find Leah Sharibu. It is quite possible. It is that you have a government that is not just interested in the welfare of the people, because we have seen occasions where when it concerns children of the high and powerful, the high and mighty, the police and security agencies, they somehow find a way to do their job as they should. But it is only when it comes to the children of the oppressed, of people who are just poor and don't have any power, that you find this complete cluelessness and inability to do anything by the security agencies. I mean, how many times have we heard, for instance, that the response of the security agencies to the Boko Haram insurgency has grown to the extent that they now use drones and all of that? How many times have we had that? How many times have we heard of all kinds of systems, from the international communities that are being deployed into the fight against insurgency? So what that means is that you actually don't have a lack of technology, that could be utilized to be able to find where this person is, to locate her whereabouts, and then plan a precision intervention that can then get her, that can rescue her. So it is not an absence of the capability to do things. It is that you have a government that's not just interested, and you have an army that pursues the war against the Boko Haram, not as a war to protect the lives of Nigerians, but as a business. How many times have we heard of stories about military generals not wanting the war to end, of weapons and co getting to the wrong hands, of funding and all of that? So that at the end of the day, what we need to be talking about, therefore, is that apart from protests and agitations, that there's the urgency for Nigerian youth to organize themselves to politically end the rule of these gangsters in power. Because the more they continue to remain in power, the more the likes of Leah Sharibu will remain in captivity. But also, the more people like us who are speaking now will become candidates for abduction, for death on the highways, for other kind of calamities that lurks all about in Nigeria. Because I think Efena is quite right that there are certain calamities in this country that is not even restricted to the poor people. You have a country where people have an accident and they even have the resources to take themselves to the best hospitals in the world. But they don't control the first responders who will come there, because Nigeria does not have a good ambulance system. We have roads that are, taken over by traffic. We have other things that don't work that ensures that, even when you have all of the resources in the world, Nigeria can just happen to you in the local palace. So that, in that sense, there's a question of fighting for a new way of running this country, away from the calamity we have known for the past 60 or so years. And that requires young people coming together, using the weight of their numbers, to push out this rotten ruling elite out of power. But how to do that will be to organize ourselves politically. We need a party of poor Nigerians, of radical Nigerians, of working people Nigerians, of Nigerians who want a new way of running the country. And that will only be possible when we are united. And I like a point made earlier by one of us here, that it is not just a question of religion. Even though, yes, Leah Sharibu is being kept only because she will not renounce her faith. It's a question really that all of us are in captivity in this country. And we can all become victims of the same thing Leah Sharibu is a victim of now. So that we have to unite, therefore, across tribes, across religion, on the basis of our class interests, to come together to enforce a political solution, which will bring in a new leadership for the country, that can then ensure that those rights enshrined in the Constitution, as quoted by our lawyer, regarding the protection of the rights of the lives of Nigerians, it is something that those people who will be ruling us, who will be the leaders of the country, will take as an important article of inauguration, then they forget it immediately after. So we need a new way of running this country. That is the only other alternative that I can put forward. But before we get to that point of changing the leadership, we must continue to march, to organize, to fight, to demand. In fact, I think one of the best things that can happen out of this conversation is how all of us here, outside of this conversation today, can then put us together later and say, what do we do? Who do we reach out to? can we form something, that can ensure that the federal is using our own skills to advance this cause? I'm doing mine in my own, community. Our lawyer is doing ours in our own community, and and the resource person from the education fund is also doing their own. And while you in the media are also doing yours, so that at the end of the day, if we do all of these things consistently under the same umbrella, then perhaps in the next few weeks, in the next few months, before the next anniversary, maybe we might find Leah Sharibu. But even if we don't find her, and I hope we do, I'm very hopeful that we will. But even if for anything we don't, we also have a duty to prevent a reoccurrence of this, to prevent any one of our children falling into this, something which would happen if this current status quo continues.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Taiwo, for taking us through all of that. Because, these are different issues that we actually need to deal with. All right. So this is about 3 minutes to 1 right here on your Women Radio WFM 91.7. And, of course, my name is Rose Yusuf Kaiser, and we're having a discussion today with our panelists on Leah Sharibu's Captivity, a call to end the circle of abductions in Nigeria. And of course, for you to be a part of the conversation, you can dial 07000 917 917. You can also dial 0800 1235 917. You can send us a WhatsApp message to 070 317 56537. Those are the numbers to get in touch with us today. And don't forget that we are live on YouTube and Facebook at WFM 917. All right, so we have our panelists with us today. Barrister Tolu Adeoti, she's a women's rights advocate. We have Hassan Taiwo Soweto, a social activist. We have Ifenla Oligbinde, an inclusion advocate. And we have Bayushomore Ayorinde Olushola, the founder, Education Watch. All right, so we'll just come to you now, Bayushomore. I hope that you're with us. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
All right, so now, so far, all right, there have been successful models from other countries that Nigeria can adopt to curb or rather, let me put the question this way. Looking at it, as somebody from the education sector, now, when you look at what's happening around in other countries, do you think that there have been successful models from other countries that you think Nigeria can adopt to curb some of these attacks that we get to have on our schools?
Definitely. There are models that we can copy. We have been watching over education sector in the last 25 years. And the challenge that we face is institutional. We don't have a plan for emergencies. We only look forward to when the deed is done. And we don't have full control. We don't have accountability. And this has to do with the policymakers and the people that are in charge. When we talk about this crisis of abduction, it mostly has to do with issue of not have adequate plan for emergencies. And we are not creating a good learning culture. Now, this has to do with the policymakers and the government. But we can actually look at some other countries that are part of this Safe Schools Declaration.
Yeah.
About 120 countries have signed into that. Sadly, US is not one of them. Over a dozen countries have refused their using their schools for military operations and education. And we have countries like Denmark, like Ecuador, like New Zealand, like Norway, Spain, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. Now, Ukrainian activities void on the authorities in the face of the full-scale Russian invasion. They issued a high-level military order to avoid using schools as a point. And we have a lot of things like that going around.
Yeah.
What we think, for example, we have a particular country, that's Michigan, pilot program to help curb the act of mass violence in 2023. About $15 million was given as a grant for that project, and is to target violence prevention. Now, a collaborative program between Michigan State and University Department of Psychiatry and Safe Schools, Sound Schools. That's a non-profit organization that involved in safety, advocacy, and rescue model. And this happened to be somebody that was, the daughter was rescued, and he made that grant available for them to be able to do that. I think our institution needs to go into this aspect of doing more research on the prevention. Rather than talking about is where we have abduction. There are things that can be done to be able to prevent abduction happening in schools. And it's just a function of institutional failure, like I said before. If you go to schools, most schools in Nigeria today don't have fence. And you can walk into any university now, you can walk to any school without being hindered. In fact, most of the public schools that we have, when you get to the gate, people that you see at the gate are old men and people that are feeble, that are not able to cope with situation when they arrive. So that we need to talk about more about prevention, and that is what research needs to be done. Also, we need to encourage accountability so that we can monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of violence prevention programs, collect data to identify gaps, and ensure that interventions meet the needs of all. Create strong system to ensure accountability. Our policymakers should create policies that enable teachers to promote learning culture. Now, create policies that support the implementation of violence prevention programs, like I said before. And because Nigeria is part of this Save Our School project, we should be able to do more regarding that. Because sometimes when we have people coming out to say that there have been abduction there could be something that we can put in place to prevent that from happening. And that has to do with the government, the policy, and the parents. There's going to be collaboration between the community and the school and the community. So that you can be able to stop any act of abduction before it started. So it's a whole lot of exercise that involves our institution. The Federal Ministry of Education in Nigeria and all the state Ministry of Education, they are not really doing much in the aspect of prevention of abduction or kidnapping. Now, the schools are prone to a lot of people coming in at any point in time. And we've been talking about this over time, that safety first. And that's what they use in the oil sector. They talk about safety first. Now, we need to put in place a program that will ensure there are safety before we now start talking about getting the people released from captivity. If we have a good safety mechanism, we'll have getting to this level of having people that are not able to being captured by kidnappers. So we need to do more and follow more on research. Research. We are not the tertiary institution in Nigeria are not doing much in that area. And you find that you go to some of the schools, what you find there are projects that are not workable. There are things that are not useful. We have people that can do more in that area, and there need to be provision of funds, grants from different sectors to actually step down the aspect of kidnapping and abduction. If we don't do that, we might not be able to go forward, because we will just be talking about quite a lot of them. But this thing can happen anywhere, on the road, in the schools, on the street, anywhere. So we need to do a lot of preventive mechanism. These countries are doing very well, and we should have to copy them.
All right. Thank you so much, Baishomore, for taking us through that and hampering on research, to prevent these abductions, and some things that we can do at different levels to see that this does not repeat itself, or rather keep repeating itself. Now, Barrister Tolu, let me come to you because, research has actually, been talked on, or rather emphasized here when it comes to prevention of abductions. Now, as let me talk to you now as the barrister here. Are there legal or policy frameworks that need to be strengthened, to prevent future abductions? Since research right now is being emphasized in terms of prevention of future abductions or safety for our schools, and all. So, about our policy, our legal frameworks, do we need to strengthen this to prevent future abductions?
Thank you for the questions. I think we need to strengthen the relevant laws as regards child abduction in Nigeria. So, what are the relevant laws pertaining to child abduction? So, we have this Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, which Ifela mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
As comprehensive as this provision is, it doesn't really talk about child abduction, especially in conflict-affected communities like the Boko Haram crisis that we are talking about. So, one of the legal strategies would be to kind of like put in and inculcate children abduction in the Violence Against Persons and Prohibition Act. So that makes it a very strong law. When talking about Child Rights Act talks about child abduction. In fact, Section 27 of the Child Rights Act talks about it. Then we also have Terrorism Prevention Act, which stipulates that the act of terrorism, anybody found guilty of that will be sentenced to life imprisonment. And there are some states that state that it should be 20 years, nothing less than 20 years imprisonment. So I would say that we need to find a way to harmonize all these laws so that there are no conflicting punishment sections, so that everything can be comprehensive and you know that if you're found guilty of this offense, this is what you're going to get, irrespective of the state you found yourself in Nigeria. Then we also need to talk about domesticating those laws, because there are some states in Nigeria that are yet to domesticate all these laws. It's just there. But we also now need to push it further to the enforcement, to the implementation. How do we make these laws working? How does an average Nigerian person understand that this is a crime? And it is so, because the punishment section is stipulated there, and anything if you're found guilty of committing that crime, you will be dealt with. So we need to talk about how to implement those laws, and also the political will to be able to implement those laws such that they're not just written on the books alone. They're just like just paper tiger without any effect. So we need to talk about the implementation. Then we also need to do an overall of our criminal legal system. Litigation, especially criminal legal system in Nigeria, is time consuming, it's tedious, it's slow because of the process. So we have to have a way to make sure that it's fast, such that survivors or even victims, as the case may be, will get the justice that they really decide. So we have to strengthen our judiciary such that perhaps there can even be an establishment of separate courts, separate tribunals that will be dedicated to entertaining disputes, cases on terrorism and sexual violence, abduction, forced marriages, and all of those form of crimes, so that there can be an instant and very speedy judicial intervention. Another thing is also for us to train our judges in cases like terrorism attack, children abduction, forced marriage, child abuse, child labor, and all of those cases that fall within the purview of conflict sexual related violence. So we need to train our judges in this area so that the justice system can really work for the victims. So moving to the policy framework now, I think we have to look at this cross-border system, whereby we can look at countries that share borders with Nigeria, that make our sister country to be porous. We can look at Chad. How do we sit together to make sure that all these people who are coming from your country to terrorize Nigeria, how can we make sure that those areas are dealt with? We also need to look at community policing. Who are those members of the community in northeast Nigeria that can work with the security force, that can give them relevant information? You know, they are the locals, they understand the language, they know the in and out of the community. They'll be able to give relevant information to help the military. we also need to strengthen this military arm of government. What kind of equipment are we giving them?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of technology are they using to fight this Boko Haram? So we should invest heavily in drones and CCTV cameras, in gadgets that can help them to be able to do this job. So a combination of this legal framework and policy framework, I'm very sure that will help us to achieve justice and to further prohibit cases like child abduction in the nearest future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you too, Barrister Tolu, for taking us through some of these policies, taking us through some of these, legal frameworks that needs to be strengthened, and for some that we need to come up with, to ensure that future abductions are reduced or are even taken away totally, so that we have, we can all be free in our societies. Our children can be free once again. All right, so Ifena, let me come to you now with this. Still talking about, creating safe space for survivors, and even their families too. How do you think we as a community can actually work together, to create safe spaces for at-risk girls and young women? I said we as a community because we all belong to one community or the other. And like you mentioned earlier, it is not it happened to you, now you sabi, go deal with it. Until it happens to me, then I'm much concerned, and then I find the solution to it. Instead of me to see that, it happened to A, let me lend my voice, let me see how I can help, let me see how I can be a part of that to solve that, so that even if it gets to me, I already know what to do, or others can actually show up for me, because it's not just one person that makes up a community. So how can we as a community work together to get to create safe spaces for at-risk girls and young women too?
Thank you. I want to start by saying that no one is coming to help us. Like we say in Nigerian parlance, we are on our own. We're on our own, and we all have to stand up as people, as a society, not necessarily as ethnic groups, but as human beings in Nigeria to help ourselves. Because like I said, nobody is coming to help us. I'm sure our resource person, I'm sorry I didn't get your name, sir, from Education Watch Nigeria. He's an elderly person, and I'm sure he can bear me witness that in those days.
All right, this is Women Radio WFM 91.7, and of course, this is the commemoration of Leah's 7th year of abduction, and we have been having a very good conversation right here, and just trying to see the way forward, just trying to know what we can do to make our society better, and of course to make sure that people who are around, or people who have gone through this, have a safe space, or people who are trying to see that we get to have a good society, a sane society where our children can thrive, where we don't have fear of anything at all, where we don't have any sort of worry as regards to what our children would do, or where they will go to, or if they'll even be kidnapped. Now, for girls who, because of this, because of Leah's case, we've had a lot of parents who have told their children that, oh no, you are not going to get to school, or no, you can't, because of what has happened to
I'm talking about community now,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
We don't have such community that makes people stand up as a community, and as a society, to demand accountability, transparency, and responsibility. And because we are failing as a society, we are failing in that respect. Again, it has nothing to do with tribalism. Because we are failing in that respect, we are seeing the adverse effect of that. During the 2023 election, I'm not going to go political now. I happen to be a national officer of a political party, but because of my personal political affiliation, I remember that some elderly people were calling me a bastard. They called me an Omoale Yoruba. Why? Because of my political, because of my political belief and my personal belief as to who I wanted to vote for. But it's not even really about that. We saw how people went ethnistic and, tribalistic. But you see, when it comes to taking accountability, we do not come together. We do not even, we don't come together and solidify our unity, our union as a people. Another aspect that we have to look at during election, you see several religious bodies, and I'm calling out traditional rulers and religious rulers. I have a huge respect for all traditional rulers, all religious fathers, and fathers that have done a lot of work, but they are not doing well enough at all. Enough with the over spirituality. Nigeria is, if not the most spiritual country in the whole world, but maybe one of the top spiritual countries. When it comes to spirituality, right? Nigeria, no, they carry last. Nigerians never carry last. If you see a Christian gospel minister that travels abroad, Nigerians are over there. From one, gathering to another. I do not have any issues with that because I am a Christian. However, we cannot leave what we should do for ourselves and pray away our problems. It doesn't happen like that. So I'm wondering why our spiritual fathers, those who have gone ahead of us with millions of followership, all they need to do is to make a statement, just one statement addressing social ills, and they'll be changing. But this doesn't happen. But during election, you see politicians going after religious rulers, traditional rulers, whether Christian religious rulers or Muslim religious rulers, bowing down, kneeling down, asking for prayers, they are laying hands on them and all. So what are all these things teaching us? As a politician, I understand the game, the gymnastics. It's all about numbers. The numbers must be complete. But we are talking about social ills in the community. And so we cannot come together. We can't say during election, everybody is going to keep their numbers and go after their numbers. But where there is social ills, where we all have to address, then everybody is on their own. No, we all have to come together. Traditional rulers have to hold government accountable. Federal government, state governments, local government, they have to always speak out, not only during elections. Imagine if our spiritual fathers, and it might look as if I'm going out on our spiritual fathers.
Yeah.
I know the story and tales that we used to hear about the Ayobabalolas and, the Idarosas of those years. When they are ill, they call out governments of the day. They call them out. There is no trying to separate the church from the state. No. Where there is social ills problem, you do not separate the church from the state. Why? Because when church members, mosque members, traditional worshippers, when they leave their religious gathering, they go back to the society where the problem is waiting to meet them. So we should stop looking away. When we see something, when we hear something, we should talk about it. Enough with looking away. It doesn't concern me. Enough with that. I will keep on talking about that, because if I was telling my brother as I was preparing for this gathering, and he said, "Oh, that girl, I should not be released." That was what he said. That was what my brother said. And this is what an average Nigerian would think. Oh, that's the truth, that girl. It's 7 years old. What are our spiritual fathers doing? What are our sheikhs, our imams, what are they doing? Let's even leave federal governments. Let's leave them. And the 2027 is here, right? Governments at cost levels. Let's leave them. But what about our religious fathers? What are they doing? So until we all take this thing as our responsibility, and not just leaving it to some special people for them to handle. Apart from that, we also have to, again, as a community.
All right, so that's still Ifenwa talking to us on some of the responsibilities that we need to take up and some of the things that we need to do as regards to us as a community and, as a society, putting our hands together and putting our thoughts together and doing something about it so that we can stop this from happening. I like the fact that she mentioned that, religious leaders, will not talk about this, but when they are done, being the leaders. Okay, we have our back. Yeah. All right, Ifela, we are finding it a little bit hard to hear you. I would like you to wrap up on that so that we could take some more questions.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And so we have to, I'll stop this, I'll stop here.
Okay.
As a community, we have to stand up for ourselves. Even our immediate community, what are we doing? When we hear about a domestic violence, a man beating his wife, a wife beating her husband, what do? We look away.
Okay.
When we hear something, even if you don't want to come directly to address it, make sure you get necessary contact, necessary organizations that can attend to it. If your safety is important, of course, you don't want to be seen as being the whistleblower. Yes, safety is necessary, but there's always a way you can get contact and make sure this information is passed out. But we do not do that. So I feel that as a community,
Yeah.
we have to, again, I said that before, look inward and see ourselves as our first savior in these issues.
All right. Thank you very much, Ifenla, for taking us through that. We need to look inward and see ourselves as the first issue. I think when I was in Kaduna, a little scenario happened, and one thing my aunt told me, just talk. She said that if something happens to you, especially in the middle of the night, your first parent or the first person that you would call is your neighbor. Before you can even say you're calling your parents who are probably far away, you're calling your sister, you're calling your brother, it's your neighbor, your next door neighbor, that will probably take responsibility for what is happening around you before even your family comes. So if we can have that at the back of our mind, and I think we would definitely be going far. All right, as we wind up our conversation, Hassan, let me come to you. Now, oftentimes we get to see governments make promises, but they fail to act. Every time is because the past government of Buhari, President Buhari, former President Buhari, he said lots of his campaign promises were on the girls that were kidnapped, how he would bring them out, and how he was going to fight a lot of the insurgency that we had and all of that. But till he left, we didn't see that happen. This new government has come, has not even said anything concrete as regards to all of what has happened. So what strategies do you think so far have proven effective on holding our leaders accountable? And then despite local and our international cry as regards to insecurity and abduction, what role do you think that the international bodies can actually play, especially as regards to securing Leah's release?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, one thing that I think is interesting about this conversation is that we are talking about Leah's abduction.
Yeah.
From the point of view of hostile non-state actors who are trying to who are attacking the Nigerian space, attacking the Nigerian society. And we are asking the Nigerian state, the Nigerian government to respond. And the fact that the Nigerian government has not responded adequately is an element in this conversation. But one thing that strikes me is that we also have to be asking ourselves whether the Nigerian state itself is capable of the kind of demands we are making on it. And why I'm saying this is because if you look at what has happened between 2015 and now, we are going to realize that when it comes to abduction of Nigerian citizens, the Nigerian state and the non-state actors like Boko Haram are actually in competition. In fact, if you look at the statistics, it will be difficult to know which of the two has abducted Nigerian citizens more between the Nigerian state and the Boko Haram and the different factions of that, whether it's WAP or thereabout. And because the Nigerian state is actually has become an abduction entity. The security operatives, including the DSS, the police, the army, but also the intelligence community under the NSA, have in the last few years abducted many journalists. Last year, we had many protesters during the Ember governance protest actually abducted from their home. And I'm not talking, and I use the word abduction now because these were not arrests. When somebody is arrested, they are taken to a police station, then they are charged, their lawyers are allowed to come to see them and all of that. You are talking of a case whereby citizens disappear, government entities disappear, and for weeks the police, the army, and co continue to deny that these people are in their custody, only for the revelation to then come later. So, I mean, in that sense, really, it means that we are really in a very, very difficult circumstance. But then, even as it is, we have to say that for anybody who is occupying a position of power under the Nigerian Constitution, there are certain responsibilities required of them in accordance with the Constitution.
Yeah.
And they must meet up with those responsibilities. Otherwise, the Nigerian people have a right, to demand of them to do that or to leave the position. And that is, and taking into this whole question about Leah Sharibu, I think that one of the things we have to say is that to the extent that the current government has not even openly acknowledged the fact that Leah Sharibu remains an unfinished business of the Nigerian state, is something that is unacceptable, that we must take up. And from that point of view, the role of society organizations, the media and co in Nigeria will be important. But most importantly will also be the role of the friends of the Nigerian people at the international stage. Because some of the progress that we have made in this country on the issues of those who have been abducted by Boko Haram have actually been more of a product of the international embarrassment that Nigeria faced on the international stage as a result of people of different countries coming out in outrage against what is happening in Nigeria, than even the advocacy within the country itself. And one good thing that's happened over the past few years, for instance, now is that Nigeria now has a very large diaspora, made up of many young, boisterous Nigerians and professionals who are still very much interested in what is happening back home. We have to leverage on this, and we have to see what this diaspora can do in terms of raising the issues very, very fervently outside there, and using that as a basis to call the Nigerian state to account. We need to have a situation, for instance, where Nigerian officials who are directly related to this issue of Leah Sharibu or the security sector in Nigeria can have protests against them when we visit some of these countries outside of Nigeria. But that is the only way they can realize that the fact that this person remains in captivity means that they themselves cannot rest. We also need to leverage, for instance, on social media and see what that can do. I mean, for instance, even just a Twitter-thon of a day or two, which attract global participation, can also have an effect. I mean, and that is one of the elements of the NSAS struggle that we must not forget. The NSAS struggle became a global affair because of how the message or footage of police brutality in Nigeria captured the imagination of the world, and you had several important people across the world actually tweeting around this issue. We also need to see what we have a role to play. But we have to be very suspicious of the role of government in this case, because we know very clearly that governments don't intervene in the internal affairs of another country without a geopolitical interest in mind. The place where we can get undiluted solidarity is actually from the people of the world, from trade unions, from youth organizations, from professional groups across the world, as well as from the Nigerian diaspora, the African diaspora, who can offer support for us without asking for anything back. We have to leverage on all of this, and I think that if this can happen, then it can be able to put some pressure to bear on the Nigerian authorities. What we even need to achieve immediately now is for this current government, for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to even officially acknowledge the fact that that Leah Sharibu remains an unfinished business of the Nigerian state, and that the military operations of the Nigerian state in the northeast still has finding and rescuing Leah Sharibu as one of its objectives. Right now, that is not obvious. That is not clear. That
At all.
finding and locating Leah Sharibu is part of the.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Hassan Taiwo. Barrister Tolu, let me come to you now, because we just have about a few minutes to go. Now, what can be done at the grassroots level to help to resist oppression and violence? And then you give us your final words, as regards to Leah Sharibu's abduction and the seventh year. Let's just get your final words on this.
All right, thank you. So very fast. I think we can start with basic form of education. We are all aware that they were put in captivity in school, and so that means that there's going to be an interrupted session in their education. So we can make sure that they get the basic knowledge of how to read and write. Because according to the UN report 2018, Nigeria has the highest out of school children in the whole world. And out of these out of school children, the girl child occupy about 60% of these out of school children. So that shows the large gap in education. Another thing is inclusion in the syllabus in the schools. What they can include human rights education on importance of girl child rights, gender equality, objective of gender equality, sustainable development goals, like how to achieve those in line with the protection of women and girls' rights. I'm talking about what gender-based violence is, because most times they don't even understand that they are being violated. They don't understand the pros and cons of gender-based violence. So human rights education needs to be included in the syllabus in the schools, from primary school to the secondary school. They should break it down into little concepts, such that an average, probably 5-year-old girl done to me. Then a form of economic empowerment as well. IT skills are there. They can learn how to do data analysis, what kind of skills have they got, catering, tailoring. They should just make use of their talent so that they can survive on their own. Then there should be some provision of legal aid and counsel as well. Litigation is quite expensive in Nigeria. You have to, before you afford the service of a lawyer, you have to pay through your nose. So let there be that legal aid for the indigent, vulnerable population of the community. So I just want to put this out there that women and girls activities, and just let's continue with our business. That means we are violating their human rights. We are violating their sexual and reproductive rights. So we need to just keep on with this conversation. We need to put on with this conversation so that the government knows and understand that there's an obligation on their part for them to discharge. So I'll be ending on this note. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you too, Barrister Tolu. Thank you so much. Now, let me come back to Bayu Shomore. Let's have your final words as regards, what we can do, how we can make our education system better, how we can give women and girls that opportunity to actually go to school and read without being worried of, being kidnapped or sent out of school, and all of that. And, how we can move forward. Let's have your final words on this. All right, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself so we can hear you?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please. In just a few seconds, please. Let's have your final take.
Yes. I want to thank you for this opportunity, but I must say that there's a need for explicit policies about the reintegration of abductees. The need for policy. And when you are talking about policy, you talk about how to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of a violence prevention program. We need to monitor, we need to collect data to identify gaps and ensure that interventions meet the needs of all. It's very, very important that we do that. When you talk about policy, there's no policy in Nigeria that talks about reintegration of abductees. What we have is any person in power just come with some things, okay, we give you some cash and go back. There need to be an explicit policy on that. Then there's going to be need for adequate resourcing and capacity building for abductees. How do you reintegrate them back into society? Give them resilience, more evidence on the needs of abductees and their school needs and all that. You need to have they need data to be able to know exactly what they want so that you can reintegrate them back into the system. And one of the challenges I would say is that if anybody is abducted anywhere today, you will not be able to, once you are abducted, you are released, you are on your own. Just stay and go and find how to check and prepare for emergency situations. The parent, the school system, the institution, the government, they can prepare for emergencies.
Okay.
Both of the schools that we have in Nigeria today have different, and there's no way you will be able to do that. We are talking about safety. You have to be able to liaise with the community, the parent, teachers, and the community coming up to be able to save the situation by communicating about schools' need for emergencies, so that they will be able to correlate and move together to be able to stop this issue. It's something that is very, very important. Presently, the government is not doing much in that direction. And policies are made by government. Policies are not made by us, they are made by government. And if you get into this Ministry of Education, they don't have a clear-cut policies about the aspect of safety in our schools. It's a major issue. We need to come up with data. We need to get policies that will take care of people that are abducted, and how to resettle them and get them back into the society.
Okay.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you too. Thank you too. We do appreciate all of your inputs to this. Do you want Nigeria to go forward and still, have Leah Sharibu in mind? Let's have your final words in just, less than a minute.
We are doing this already. Thank you for this invitation and this great conversation. But all media platforms, social media, traditional media, digital media, the National Orientation Agency, and every platform that is supposed to sensitize, that is a tool of sensitizing people for publicity. I believe we need to continue this conversation. Thank God for social media. Things trend, unfortunately, bad things trend with the speed of light, but Leah is not trending. I went on Twitter. I was expecting to see lots of hashtags, but it was difficult, keeping that up. So I think we need to be much more intentional. We should have films. We should at least have a film that, would have been produced to talk about the story about Leah. We should have songs made, she's not dead. I don't want to say in her memory, but to honor, our bravery. I believe that if we're able to be intentional about these things, this conversation about Leah would get to the right people at the right time. We don't have to wait until things trend and get out of hand before government comes out and starts putting out funny press releases as if they're just hearing about this thing. So
nothingness by the Nigerian state. Enough is enough to this situation where the lives of all Nigerian citizens is not safe. We need a Nigeria not safe. We need a Nigeria where all citizens can feel safe, and where the prosperity of the country can be available to all.
Okay. Thank you so much, Hassan, and a very big thank you to each and lending your voice to, a lot of ills that we lives and everyday living as people who are part of our discussion today.